seen some of this presentation before and are familiar with the ICPC, but others may not be, as opposed to the ITU itself. And so the ICPC is the world's principal non-governmental organization devoted to protection and resilience of submarine cables. It was founded in 1958. It has more than 235 members from 75 countries, including cable operators, manufacturers, ship owners and installers, industry service providers, and also government observers. And so the ICPC works globally on 6 continents. We don't yet have a cable to Antarctica, although there are a couple of proposals for that. But our work is focused on, with its members, governments, international organizations, and other marine industries to try to mitigate the risks of natural and human damage to cables, develop recommendations for best practices for industry and governments throughout the cable life cycle, promoting scientific research regarding cables in the marine environment, very important, particularly with the new BBNJ treaty, and to promote the rule of law for the oceans, which permits this infrastructure to exist and thrive. And so we do a lot of work before various international and regional organizations, and may have worked with some of you in those capacities. And the other thing, which is not called out here, but which I'll note and it informs some of the presentation today, we collect and analyze an enormous amount of data about submarine cables. And we believe that this will help inform the work of the advisory body and the discussions in the various panels of this summit today. Next slide, please. So the industry engages in what I will call self-help with its own activities to promote submarine cable protection and resilience, but it can't do everything on its own. I did want to outline, though, in 2 particular areas, both in the design phase and in the operating phase, what submarine cable operators and their partners do to try to maximize protection and resilience, as they don't simply leave it to governments to manage this. And so there is a lot of activity, both in the design phase and in the operating phase. But before I get into that, I was just going to talk a little bit about what we see as the more general prerequisites for cable protection and resilience. Although the International Telecommunication Union is the UN specialized agency for digital services and technologies, it is not a global regulator for submarine cables. And in fact, there isn't one. Submarine cables are governed by rights and freedoms under the Law of the Sea Convention, UNCLOS, and within national jurisdictions and areas of territory by local legal requirements and regulations. This infrastructure depends greatly on regulatory certainty and predictability for installation, operation, and repair. And that requires awareness of the importance of cables, the technical and environmental characteristics. And when we talk about technical characteristics, this is the cable. It's not some giant pipeline-sized thing in the deep ocean. This is it. This is the whole cable. It is not bundled together with multiples of this, but these very thin fibers, to the extent that you can even see them here, are what are carrying the communication stream. The rest of this is for transmitting power to amplifiers for the system and for protecting the cable. In coastal areas, the cable has a slightly bigger diameter in order to protect it from some of the key risks, which I'll talk about in a second. But this is a reminder that there's a lot to protect given how small and potentially fragile this is, given the natural and human environments in the oceans. So keep that size in mind. And if you need a reminder, there's actually a cross section as my lapel pin as well, same size. So the other prerequisites that we see, sharing information with marine industries, between industry and governments, and within components of national governments. This is a big challenge to ensure that different parts of governments work together. And finally, as I noted before, the Law of the Sea Convention. Next slide, please. So when we talk about risks and threats, more than 70% of faults, a fault is an event that ultimately requires a repair of a submarine cable globally, are due to commercial fishing and anchoring. But there are a variety of other activities here that you see, both human and some other marine industries, some unexploded ordnance relating to military activities, and natural events as well. I don't propose to go through all of this, but we'll have these materials for reference. But the oceans are busy areas. They're only getting more busy. And with climate change, the ocean environment is only becoming more unpredictable as well. Just consider that with fishing risks being a significant driver of cable damage, with climate change, fish are moving to different parts of the ocean. And that means fishing risks are moving as well where they were not originally present. Next slide, please. So here graphically you can see, and this is an industry term, external aggression, which sounds like an intentional attack. That's not what we mean by that. But the principal cause is statistically anchoring and fishing and the others, other human or natural activities. And then with the types of damage, in many cases, the cable damage really involves seawater getting into the cable sheath, so it causes an electrical fault known as a shunt fault. The cable can continue to operate for some time, but it ultimately needs a repair. Optical failure obviously is going to affect the communication stream. Next slide, please. So here we have what industry is looking to do during the design phase. They start with the idea that they want to pursue the shortest viable route, but then they want to modify it to find or maximize flat, uninteresting seabed that minimizes risks from other natural and human factors. And increasingly, there's a focus on geographically diverse routes to create a mesh network so that not all cables are on the same routes or landing in the same places. And so there's an elaborate design process, multi-stage, that results in the planning of the cable. Next slide, please. And then post-installation, there's a whole suite of activities that involve informing others in the ocean environment about where cables are, how to protect them, how to address potential new activities that are layered on once submarine cables are installed, coordination mechanisms, particularly with commercial fishermen and fishing unions, crossing agreements. Not all cables and pipelines and other things on the seabed go in parallel. They cross each other. So there's a need to have legal arrangements for that. And then there's a whole legal regime for pursuing claims for damage. And not last but not least, certainly measures focused on security and cybersecurity. Next slide, please. So the ICPC decided a few years ago to put some of its thinking into a document called the Best Practices, which is available on our website. Many of you may be familiar with it already. This is not a prescriptive mandatory list, but some of our thinking based on these risks and what we see in the ocean environment, what can be done to promote submarine cable protection and resilience. It has two components. It's about 12 pages long, so it's meant to be short, but sort of a primer with general principles and then some specific measures which can be adopted by individual states and in particular regions. But in terms of general principles, it's urging governments to look at risk holistically, to create regulatory regimes to foster speedy installation and repair, promoting the rule of law in the oceans, consultation with industry, using the best available science, and then engaging with other states on a regional and global basis, because there are some activities that can affect connectivity in other parts of the world. Deep seabed mining is a good example of that. Next slide, please. And here, I'm not going to go through all of these details, but there are specific best practices that address fishing and anchoring risks, spatial separation, geographic diversity, creating a single point of contact or a focal point within national governments which is as much an outward-facing issue as it is an inward-facing one, so that governments, as I noted before, there's often an issue with coordinating internally, something that we had discussed this morning in our advisory body meeting. But again, there are other specifics here, which I won't go into for the sake of time. Next slide, please. And here I'm just going to present a little bit of information about fault and repair data and repair timeframes. And in presenting this, I'd like to offer my particular thanks to and recognition of one of our advisory body members, Andy Palmer-Felgate. Andy, if you would wave to everybody here, he's seated right in the front. Andy is representing the North American Submarine Cable Association as an advisory body member, but as a longtime member of the ICPC's executive committee, Andy has led data collection and analysis efforts for the ICPC in these areas. And so these statistics and graphics I am borrowing liberally from Andy's work, so he deserves the recognition for this. But just briefly, the ICPC really does have very good data on global faults and repairs. And this is collected in a way because it often involves data from competitors so that it's anonymized and it's not sharing commercially sensitive information beyond the organization. But this shows the distribution of faults by maritime zones, whether that's the territorial sea, the EEZ, or on the high seas, and in particular geographic regions, and then repair time frames for particular regions and jurisdictions. And so it's our hope that the advisory body is going to make a lot of use of this data in informing its work and its outputs. In 2023, there were 206 repairs conducted in 136 jurisdictions globally. 51% involved service-affecting damage. So if you think back to the types of damage that I was referring to, that means that the other 49% were mostly electrical faults that allowed the cables to continue to operate. The longest repair time frame, 947 days. That's a very long time for a repair. These maps are showing two different kinds of maintenance arrangements, zone agreements, cable owners band together in consortia based on geographic regions to contract with ship owners. For maintenance, they all have, in some cases, very long acronyms reflecting their geographies. And then private maintenance is more of a vessel owner-led model for maintenance with the particular customers. And so the ICPC's data is gathered from both of these kinds of maintenance arrangements and then anonymized. Next slide, please. So here we have information about both the global distribution of repairs and also where in the ocean they occur. And most repairs are needed in shallow water, closer to shore. That's where the human activity is for the most part, and that's where a lot of natural events can have the greatest impact. And so very few, only 2% in the last, between, that should be 2023 in the top slide, not 2013. But that period, 2010 to 2023, only 2% of the faults were on the high seas. And in terms of the global distribution of repairs, I know it's hard to see, but I think we'll make these slides available otherwise. There, you can see how many, on average, how many days or years between repairs is what is distinguishing things. And a lot of this relates to the level of human activity in the oceans. Next slide. Here we have some information about repair response times and how they are increasing considerably. The number of faults or repairs per route kilometer is declining. We've had a lot of new cable installed around the world. The number of faults is not increasing materially globally each year, but the repair times are going up a lot. And as you'll see in the top graph, in blue, the average time between notification of a need to conduct a repair and departure of the cable ship to conduct it, that time is increasing considerably. In some cases, the transit time is also increasing depending on where the cable ship is located, how long it has to travel to actually reach the location of the repair. And in the bottom graph, you have a comparison of repairs per year versus the total in-service cable length. And so in terms of other circumstances, the number of cable ships has not changed considerably globally. This begs the question of why are repair response times going up? Next slide, please. And a lot of it has to do with government regulation in various forms. There are a lot of government requirements for conducting repairs because they are in the territorial sea or they're in the exclusive economic zone, and governments might not abide by their commitments in the Law of the Sea Convention and regulate too far offshore. And so permit requirements might relate to things like customs, needing to import the cable ship itself or provide a bond. Protectionist measures like cabotage, restricting the flagging of vessels that can conduct repairs, operational permits, security clearances, and in some cases, and this is an issue in the Red Sea right now, sanctions compliance. Other factors include ship availability. As I noted, that's not increasing a lot. And then geographic region and incidence of faults, again, looking at how intensively the oceans are used with particular industries, creates a lot more repair incidents and activity. Next slide. So I'll finish just with a brief notation here of, and again, we have a lot of focus on repair times. It's a big priority issue for the ICPC. It's going to be the focus of one of our advisory body working groups. But there are very clear methods with pre-authorizing vessels to show how repair times can come down. And this kind of a mechanism is used in jurisdictions ranging from South Africa to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is a good example because there are a large number of faults in UK, in waters within UK jurisdiction each year. But there's also a mechanism for ensuring that cable ships can sail quickly to conduct repairs. And so I know that's a lot of information to chew on, very practical, and we may be coming back to some of these slides or statistics with some of the panels that we have teed up for the rest of the summit. But again, wanted to share some information about what the industry knows and is doing about cable protection and resilience, and also to frame areas where we think there needs to be much greater collaboration with governments to address these issues. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Kent, for speaking on the state of submarine cable resilience today. Now, for those of us who are putting up content for the summit, I understand the hashtag is SubSummit. So hashtag SubSummit. Feel free to tag our organizers and our sponsors through the duration of the summit. We'll proceed with the panel discussion. I'd like to invite our moderator, Mr. John Omo, the Secretary General of the African Telecommunications Unit, ATU, a position that he has held since January 2019. Under his visionary leadership, the ATU has developed a regional framework to facilitate access to submarine cables for all African countries, particularly landlocked countries, as part of a white paper on connectivity and accessibility best practices in Africa. He's taken his seat, but let's warmly welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you, Mr. John.
Good afternoon. Uh, may I may I have your attention? May I have your attention? This afternoon, we've heard of the various operational environment in which cables are and the sort of challenges that we experience. And I have a panel that I want to bring on board quickly. Mustafa Yassin Sheikh. Mustafa is the Director General of the regulator in Somalia. Mustafa, just come to the stage right next to me here. Ms. Dazao Ziguo currently serves as the senior consultant in the field of submarine cables to the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology of China. Please take your seat. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Vincent Lamaire, I have it. Oh, right. Quite seated next to me, but we didn't catch up. Thank you very much for joining. And I have broken the rules. I've broken the rules because Funke Opeke is unable to be with us this afternoon. My employer, who is seated in white garment, has asked me not to be in any panel where there's no lady. The ladies are saying, yes, that's true. And so my employer doesn't allow me to sit in any panel where there's no lady. And so we brought on board Nomsa Mwayenga. Nomsa, just join us on stage here. I'll get to introduce a dynamic lady. Just take your seat, Nomsa. Nomsa works for African Subsea and Ecosystem Forum, so a forum that brings subsea cable operators and those that are interested in the eco system. And let me bring, last but certainly not least, representing, let me bring Yomi Adebayo. Yomi? Yomi, walk like you are my brother. Walk up like you're my brother. Yeah, that's more like it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we should have been 5 people here, but we are 6. For the reason that I've said the gentleman in white has given me clear guidelines that I shouldn't be in a panel where there's no woman. And so I stick to that for good reasons. Yasin, we have had this afternoon the sort of challenges, the operating environment in which cables operate. And more so, I want us to have a bias towards this continent, deliberate, because this is where we are. And so I want to start with you, Mr. Yassin. Briefly, talk to us in terms of what you feel governments should do more. What you feel governments should do more in terms of undersea cable resilience, especially from the part of the world where you come from. Somalia is at the Horn of Africa, ideally should be serving upwards of 8 countries by cable. We have had some challenges there. The map that you saw earlier do indicate that cable cuts in that region somehow prevalent, perhaps the reasons why, and what you feel that governments should do more.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Omar. And I think this is a good question. And thank you very much for bringing this question. I think the governments, they are not the only players in the field. There are other players, but still the governments, they have an important role to play for the submarine cable resilience. And their role is very critical, and the role of the government is very critical for enhancing the security and the submarine cable resilience in the world. First of all, the governments can start by comprehensive risk analysis in their region, the unique challenges both in the operational aspect or also in the aspect of the physical risks in their environment, which is unique maybe in their special region. where there is for the submarine cable is landing their station. The other thing is also regulating the submarine cable investment, which depends more on the investment environment in their country and promoting the getting more cables in their area, especially the to advance the redundancy and also the getting more routes coming to the country to avoid the risk for missing the fault line. That's one. The second one also is the pre-installation for the government is to focus on the investment in the sector to afford the using the materials in the area during the laying process of the submarine cables to afford any challenges in the environment or the potential threats in the area. The other area, as I mentioned, is enhanced security protocols of the governments, which can be supportive for the investment and the resilience of the submarine cables in the regions and in the world as well. So this initiative is can prevent the accidental and also the human-made accidents related to the submarine cables in the area. The other area is promoting the public-private partnership and working with the other actors or players in the ground, like the submarine cable providers, the technical community, as well the investors, to bring environment which can promote the submarine cable investment and enabling in the world. That's another one. The other area is incentive for technology development, where the government is playing another role for incentives for research and development. In that area, the government play in critical area, both to enhance the capacity of the monitoring, the advancement of the new technologies, open for new investment, new ideas, new technologies such as the sensors to detect the faults and the use of the emerging technologies for the submarine cable and monitoring as well. The other area for where the government play critical role is also the crisis management plan. In case of crisis, the government is also play a different role for if they have if the government put in place at the first hand good protocol for the crisis management. Also, it supports guides and make accountable also for the private sector, both the landing cable owners or also the investors and also the governments as well. So other area where the governments play critical role is about the international cooperation with the other international organizations and the governments, where they collaborate between the investment, cable landing, and also promoting the resolving the critical aspects and also the repair licensing and also so the collaboration in the other countries also is very important. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the response. Manso, welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. Special projects for Alcatel. I know you're involved quite a bit. What do you view as the greatest opportunity to improve submarine cable resilience in 2025, especially given your operations in Africa? Would you share with us any countries in Africa where you are operating and undersea cable has been declared a critical infrastructure by governments? Are there any of such examples where Alcatel operates?
Thank you very much. So, first thing I would like to say is that submarine cable are resilient. When we deploy submarine cable respecting ICPC rules, and these rules are very good and are really protecting cables. Second point is that the different suppliers deploy are both very resilient and very reliable. So for me, the question is more how to further improve resilience rather than our system resilient. Systems are resilient. It's really important everyone understand that. If you go for terrestrial network, you know very well that the failures are much more often than the one you face on submarine cable. 200 repairs a year for 2 million kilometers is not that much. Now, there are areas for improvements. The first one I would suggest is performing cable monitoring. Quite often, cable are led, but once they are led, they are not monitored. And there are technologies that permit to monitor. So you can monitor using AIS monitoring. You can monitor using distributed acoustic sensors. You can monitor using other technologies, but you have to do it. In some areas, you can also monitor having vessel running in the eye of the cable to be sure that fishing vessel, anchoring are not done in shallow waters close to the place where cable are. Second point, and I believe it has been said before, make permits for repair immediate. We are repairing cables on a weekly basis, and sometimes it takes 1 day to repair a cable, sometimes to get the permits and to mobilize the vessel. Sometimes it takes 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months to get it. So really simplifying permits for the repair is of key importance, and it's, for me, quite easy to simplify that. Third point is launch rejuvenation of the marine maintenance fleet. The marine maintenance business is a difficult business. The money countries and cable owners are putting there is not at a level that permit the company owning the vessel to buy new vessels and to replace vessels. If we don't change that, the vessels which are in average already quite old, around 20, the maintenance vessels are around 25 years old currently in average, will become older and older, and we are not going to introduce new vessels. So thinking to the rejuvenation of that fleet, for me, is really of importance. And I will give a last point, or two last points. One is there are countries, there are cable owners that are performing stress tests on their cable. So they simulate a cable cut, they simulate a land cable cut, they simulate a station failure, and they see how the system is reacting. And by that, they know what they have to do when the event is effectively happening. And in particular, I would insist on the cybersecurity stress test. From time to time, cable owners ask us to perform what we call a cybersecurity penetration test on their station. And I can tell you the results are not always very good. Sometimes they are very good, sometimes they are very poor. So this would be my recommendation.
You haven't quite answered. I'll come back to it. In countries where you operate, have you had instances where government takes a deliberate action to declare undersea cables a critical infrastructure? I didn't get that. I didn't get that, sorry.
In fact, cables, submarine cables are part of marine maintenance agreement, or they are not part of marine maintenance agreement. If they are part of marine maintenance agreement, there are rules of reparation, and we apply the rules. We don't go for governments. We apply the rules of the contract. From time to time, there are cable owners who don't want to be part of maintenance agreement because they don't want to pay. That's happened. And then they come back to you and they say, I want to be the highest priority. There, it's become difficult to implement it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the response. Mr. Zhao Zinguo, Senior Consultant, Ministry of Industry and Information Technology of China. I hope our interpretation is up and running. Confirm you are hearing me? Thank you. In general, people are more aware of the importance of submarine cables, but do you feel that governments are more actively involved in real practices and coherent policy to ensure their resilience? Do you feel that governments are doing enough in terms of coherent policy practices to ensure undersea cable resilience? And if not, what more can we do?
首先感谢你的提问。 应该说海缆越来越受到了各方面的高度重视。10年前呢，海缆可能只是工程师口中的
Sorry,
专业
I
术语。
think my panelists need the headgear. If
专业
the
术语。
stewards could kindly help.
但是如今呢，海缆事故的连续反应已经让它成为了国际新闻的常客。尤其是在2022年，唐加火山喷发，破坏了海缆，让这个太平洋岛国的通信瘫痪了近2周。再一个呢，应该在国际上也是几近失联。还有一个呢，就是欧亚间呢多条洲际海缆连接也发生了故障，所以也影响了欧亚间很多企业的数据通信。这些事件提醒我们，海缆呢的安全不仅仅是一个技术问题，更是一个关系到一个国家和世界的联系，也关系到全球经济的稳定，也关系到各国人民切身利益的一个战略问题。刚才您提到的这个政府行动，应该说这个政府呢，作为管理者和服务者，在保障海缆安全、提升海缆韧性方面承担着不可替代的责任和使命。许多国家的政府已经从被动应对正在向主动出击，开始采取了一些积极的行动。尤其从国际范围来看，首先在这个机构方面，一些国家也成立了海缆的专门机构。还有呢，组建了跨部门的协调机构，比如说在中国，专门组建了跨部门的协调机构。还有呢，有些国家呢也设立了海缆韧性的专门的资金，专项资金。还有一些国家呢，动员了海洋的一些执法力量。总的来看呢，我们看到的，国际上围绕着海缆议题的政府间的对话和合作呢，也在不断的增加。从这点来看呢，我感觉呢，政府的这个行动正在发挥作用，力度也越来越大。从中国来看呢，的确在这方面也采取了一系列的措施，比如说我刚才讲到的，成立了跨部门的联合机构进行协调相关的事务，还有增加了一些船只的巡检和检查。再一个呢，开展了这个教育。普及教育，还有呢，加强了一个国际的一些合作。当然我们也可以注意到呢，与相关发达比较，从资源的调度以及海缆的保护方面，在发展中国家来看，仍然是需要进一步加强的一些工作。的确，它也处于一个弱势的地位。所以我们认为呢，发展中国家对海缆韧性的需求反而更加迫切。这些国家的需求应该得到更好的倾听和关注。您刚才提到的说政府的连贯一致性的政策，我呢认为，应该政府呢作为一个政策的制定者，应该关注2个方面的一致性。一种呢是海缆发展政策、保护政策和灾害管理政策的政策工具的完整性和相互的协调性。在这个方面呢，我们认为，各国政府呢都在结合本国发展的目标，和具体的情况，不断完善本国的政策工具箱。尤其刚才肯特先生提到的，SAPC 在推动关于这海缆韧性方面最佳实践方面，我认为做了很好的探索，也形成了很好的一些实践案例。尤其呢，作为一个很好的一个示范，值得各国进行学习和借鉴。当然，政策的制定也是一个复杂的社会工程。我相信呢，各国的政府和立法者也在不断的在做出探索，不断的进行努力。另一个呢，刚才提到这个政策，我理解是国内政策与国际政策怎么样在规则或者说国家跟国家之间政策的协同性方面怎么样更一步加强比如说欧盟在推动国家间的协调行动方面也开展了一些尝试我们认为呢，国家间特别是通信海缆重点区域的国家间应该可以进一步探索和尝试建立 针对海南韧性问题的多边合作的框架，或者共同的行动准则，包括多方的协调机制、联合海上的执法行动的规范、联合事故调查以及海缆维修和防灾减灾的一些机制建设。当然，在这里呢，我再强调一点，就是谈到政府在海缆保护法律法规方面需要努力的方向。当然，这个呢，在panel 4会进一步讨论。在这里呢，我想强调，就海缆已经作为国家的或者国际的一个基础设施，往往受到不同国家法律的监管，确实存在它的复杂性。所以我认为呢，应该在尊重各国主权的基础上，基于平等、协商、共识和开放的原则下，开展国际层面建立海缆保护的公约，或者说规范，明确国家的义务、保护的行动和迫害追责等相关的原则，为各国制定政策提供方向的指引，推动各国政策和管理活动更加顺畅的做好衔接和合作。谢谢。
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I got quite a bit of the last bits of it, but I think the point you're making there is standard setting, both at the national level in terms of various agencies that are involved in the ecosystem and at the international level, because of course there are various players, including international waters. And that's where I want to bring you on board, Madame Nomsa. You are working in an ecosystem trying to bring the various players in the ecosystem, be it private, be they public, to deal with standard setting on issues undersea cable. Please talk to us about this and how you feel governments can assist more in that regard.
Okay, thank you, SG. From my perspective and my observation, I think everything has to start from somewhere. And when you look at the efforts that government is making, governments across, particularly the region I am seated, and the level of participation and collaboration between the governments and private sector, it's being driven by a need. So I don't have enough data to represent what is happening across the region or internationally. But what I do know is everyone at this point has experienced some sort of outage that has impacted them one way or another. And what is starting to happen is government and the private sector are trying to reach out for solutions. And what has always been present and in some way also missing has been vehicles that drive the collaboration. So this is why we applaud the development of vehicles such as this one, which can come and hold hands from different sectors. You will find government will always be more concerned about regulation and security, and the industry is more interested in developing the technical expertise and the operational expertise. And those are two parallel, even though they intersect at various levels. And my observation is that this is now starting to happen more and more. When we established ASAF, and we are not yet at a point where I can represent the interests of all of the stakeholders we are in engagement with or hoping to be engagement with. What I'm seeing is a common need for centralized repositories, data repositories. So if I go back to some of the data that has been shared, Andy and team have been working on some very good data sets. In some cases, that is not relayed to some of the users and people that need to use some of their data sets. And there's a lot of sprouting technologies which can be used, but it just now takes us to take a step back um, and use the different vehicles to keep the conversations going and to also form community to support government and the private and public sectors so that there is continued dialogue because that's where a lot of the problems and a lot of the opportunities can sprout out. And there are so many people that I see in the room, distinguished delegates as well, that are interested in moving forward, finding solutions and innovations that can help with cable resilience and looking at it from the undersea telecom side. Undersea, there is the blue economy and also the terrestrial side of subsea cables, because a subsea cable in some cases doesn't just end at the shore. There is a need for that cable to be terminated on the terrestrial. So it's all um, efforts that everyone is trying to make, and we just need to come together more often.
Thank you very much, Madam. I think a centralized data system where people can share reliable information for purposes of decision making comes to the fore quite a bit. Yomi, certainly last but by no means least. It's not that there's a need for greater engagement between submarine cable industry and governments. That need is a given. How can we facilitate a lot more of that between the submarine cable industry and governments for purposes of ensuring that resilience is ensured? In your view, from where you operate as main one.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. You know, as an operator, first and foremost, I want to say that I am really happy to be in this room because right now in this room, we have the center of gravity for the submarine ecosystem, right? Because we have both the operators, we have the regulators, and we have all the different participants in between. So, and this could not have been possible also if not for an event that happened last year, March, I think, where we experienced an outage. And it was interesting to listen to the data that was being shared by Kent, which was showing that most of the cable fault outages, 54% of them actually happened within the exclusive EEZ, exclusive economic zones of most countries. And that is what happened in our case. Our cable has been in existence for the past 15 years. We've only experienced 3 outages. 2 has been as a result of trawling, potentially trawling activities, and 1 has been as a result of seismic events that happened in Cote d'Ivoire. But yeah, in terms of cooperation between public and private sector, I think I'm not going to rehash some of the things that a lot of people have said, a lot of good points, both in terms of proactive measures, both in terms of cable redundancy, cable resilience, cable protection. So I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on 3 things, and I want to reframe the issue. You understand where we are coming from. Essentially, as Kent mentioned, the average mean time for repair for cables when they get caught, because you can do all the things that are right, all the proactive measures, and you still have like a seismic event and your cable gets caught, right? So the average mean time for repair usually on this side of the Atlantic anyway is usually about, let's say, about 6 weeks, right? Depending on if you have enough spares, if you have the manpower, and most importantly, if the vessel is available, because you either belong to either of the 2 consortia really that really drives either cable laying or cable repair, and each of the consortia possibly has maybe 2 or 3 vessels. There on this side of the Atlantic, there is no single cable repair that is dedicated. When I say dedicated, I mean that is as a logistic base on this side of the Atlantic. I think there was something around South Africa some time ago. I don't know how that went. Now, what is the issue I'm trying to frame here? So even if you have a cable repair, A, it takes you about 6 weeks for you to get done. B, average cost of repair is about $2 million. Average personnel cost is about $250 to $500 per day for each personnel on the vessel. And average mean time also to get all the permits is usually, depending on how efficient where the cable fault occurs and how efficient that administration or government is usually maybe about 4 weeks. I'm getting somewhere with this. Um, and now, if you look at all of, and the average, sorry, one last point, the average touch point in terms of government agencies that you have to either get permits from or seek permission from is usually at the very least 6 or 7 agencies, covering their maritime agencies, their customs, the immigration. So the list goes on. Now, I'm speaking from a bit of a narrow experience because I'm talking on this side of the Atlantic. Um, so for me, in terms of where do I see greater cooperation happening, I think a couple of things need to happen, and it's a great thing and it's a great initiative that we have all of the partners and operators in this room right now. I think from an African, being looking at it from an Afrocentric perspective, I think one of the things that we need to do also is to own the initiative. And I'm so glad that the minister is really canvassing a lot. And the fact that we were able to put this together in Nigeria is really a testament to how much we're championing, trying to champion some of these things. Now, where do we need that investment? We need and it's such it's amazing. Sometimes when we think about it, it's really something that is simple, but at the same time, we put our heart to it, we will overcome the challenges and difficulties. There needs to be a logistical base within Africa along the coast of this North and South Atlantic, right? And there needs to be a dedicated vessel that all the governments can all invest in and essentially make sure that cable repair times, the deployment time is cut down significantly, and more importantly, the cost is also cut down significantly. Now, when you have these issues, no matter how many proactive measures that you put in place, when you do have a disaster or a cable cut happening, now you have the ability and the capacity for a vessel to be deployed within, why can't it be deployed within 2 days, 3 days to get to within a week? The other choke point is on the permitting side, right? We need to have a single, and I think that's where we also need to see more increased flexibility from governments. And if we designate submarine cables as critical national infrastructure, when they do get damaged, then there should be a single permitting source where you can, a one stop shop, where you can get all your permits for that particular vessel, and they can go out and immediately do the cable repair. So again, if you complement the logistical base, all right, that has a place where you have all the spares, where you have the vessel, together with a enhancing permitting process, and enhancing and simplifying the permitting process, you for this side of the region, I think you do a significantly better job. And I'm going to latch on also to one last thing that Nomisa was talking about. The problem on this side of the Atlantic is there is already resilience built in a number of cables, and we already have redundancy, and there's a lot of there are about 10 cables that cover the North and South Atlantic region, if I'm counting the Ella Link and the sail cable that connects with South America. And each of the cable operators are buying capacity off each other, so there's a bit of redundancy, right? The 25 years ago, there was a supply issue, but now we have a supply glut. So the real issue really is on the middle mile and last mile. That is where we have the big problem on this side of the world, right? And that is where we need more cooperation again within governments, right, to make sure that the borders, we don't see borders as geographical points where everybody isolates themselves, but rather you need to build more capillary networks across the entire Africa to make sure that the supply that gets to the shores of all these coastal states gets piped and transported to the people that need it. I think those are my prescriptions. I have a bit of other prescriptions, but time will not let us to allow us to talk into everything. But again, I think it is really great that we have at the center of gravity all the people that are important to make things happen, and we're having these conversations now. I think what would be great is to make sure that we don't lose the momentum of the velocity that we're creating at this point, and there are actionable steps at the end of the day that helps us to ensure that we have shared prosperity through the digital innovation and the digital infrastructure that is built across Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those comments. I want to open the floor to the audience. I think there are a number of issues that have come from the panelists. more so the issue, the need for a lot more cooperation and working together between government agencies, a lot more cooperation at the international plane, the fact that there is perhaps an investment opportunity for a lot more repair vessels and operation centers for a region as busy as this. So I'd like to open the floor. The Coast Guard, the Maritime Authority, the communications regulator not talking to each other quickly enough for purposes of ensuring that licenses are given in time, permissions are given in time. And so the turnaround time when you have to see upwards of seven or so agencies when there's an emergency is sometimes utterly frustrating. Let's admit it. It's not that the cable is cut because you wanted it cut. It's cut because of some force external to the operations. Can I take 3 questions maximum? I see my controller is already up on her feet. So Madam will take one at the back there. 2. I was hoping that my regulator is still in the room. I'd like to see how fast he talks to his regulator at the maritime front in Lagos. Okay, let's get mics to those 2. Quickly, brief to the point. Don't make statements. Just ask the question and indicate whom it is directed. Honorable Minister, there's a challenge here. Perhaps when next you're in cabinet, a lot more cooperation between the maritime regulator and your agency. In Nigeria, fortunately, you only have upwards of 7. I know countries where for you to get a permit to the coast, you are talking out to upwards of 15 agencies. But I think the sense of what has been shared here is a framework where various regulators can work, the Maritime Authority, the Communications Regulator, so that when there's a cable cut, we deal with it as an emergency. That perhaps may be one of our take homes this afternoon. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Christian from Ghana. When Ken was presenting, he said 70% of the fault is due to fishing trawlers and also anchoring. So I want to ask, what is the guidance on having cable corridors? For instance, in a country, you have more than 1 cable corridors where you can actually protect the cable much more. Because in terms of protecting the cable, you need a larger, geographical location, distance in terms of protecting the cable on either side of the cable. And in so doing, what it means is you're actually limiting the fishing space for the commercial fishing vessels. So do you suggest some sort of cable corridor whereby we can have enough laws to protect the cable? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll reserve that to Net1 and Alcatel, if that's okay. Next question, please. Let's take all of them.
Okay, thank you. My name is Soye Kachi Obwe from Wyok. And my question is this, and it's more on proactive measures towards preventing cable fault or cut. We observe sometimes from the AIS record, we notice, we have the information on the vessel in terms of the speed, maybe at the 0 knots within the cable protection zone. And the ideal approach is to speak to the authorities who controls the vessels, the NIMASA on MPA. But we realize, and when we try to get in touch with them, to notify the vessel that they're within the cable protection zone, to avoid, anchoring or even the fishing activities, we don't get any feedback. We don't get a response. We don't get any, urgent intervention. And it happens that most time, this at the end leads to cable cut or fault of any kind on the cable. So I don't know how do we, improve in enforcing, in awareness and also getting across to the fishing and the vessel operators, to help us, in this aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's take those two. Alcatel, you want to go first, and then Etwan.
So I can try with the first one. My father-in-law was a fisherman.
Speak up just a little bit, if you don't mind, closer to the mic.
Sorry?
Speak up a little bit. Speak up.
Okay. So, is it better there? Okay, so my father-in-law was a fisherman. And the rule for a fisherman is not seen, not catched. This was his rule, clearly. So if you want your cable not to be cut by fishermen, look to them, follow the AIS, make sure that when they are catched, they pay the price. You will see this will strongly reduce the level of cable cut by fishermen. So really, AIS monitoring associated with your naval force will reduce, at least in your waters, the risk of having the cable cut.
Yeah, thanks. On this cable corridor, I think it's a great idea. It's a great initiative. Unfortunately, again, I'm speaking from a very narrow perspective on the South Atlantic side because we see a number of the cables that have been built on this side of Africa, and unfortunately, at the time there was no designation of a certain corridor, but by fortuitously, everybody has built really along the same side, on within either from north down to all the way to south. So I think it's a great thing, if you designate as a cable corridor. On the AIS, you find that most fish trawling, most of the fish trawling activities, most of them don't put on their illegal fish trawling activities. Most of them don't put on their AIS. So it's very difficult for you also you see it very difficult for you to monitor or to contact those vessels. So you need a stronger enforcement body in terms of being able to address some of these things, and you need a bit of, and I guess for me looking at it, I think one of the prescriptive things that we can do is, if again regionally, because it impacts everybody, if regional governments together with private sector come together and form an active body that is responsible for monitoring, and we can fund it. It's something that it's for the benefit and good of everybody. You have a dedicated body that is actively responsible for proactive measures in both monitoring and preventing some of these illegal fishing activities, or some of making sure that people don't go within cable corridors. That's obviously something that would possibly, and because also the mandate would be on a regional basis. So we stop maybe approaching it from a country by country basis, for those that are within the same EEZ at the very least. I think that might be one prescriptive way of going about it.
I'll take that to be your last comment. The lady, please go ahead. Amiso?
Yeah, sure. I'm looking at it from a perspective of proactive measures for preventing cuts. In some cases, it's not possible to prevent a cut, and looking more at there is potential to prevent cuts for sure. But in other cases, there's natural disasters that happen, seismic activity that has been mentioned. And in that case, it's a matter of streamlining processes. And we need to collaborate on this, because in most cases when there is a fault, an outage, think about the worst case scenario of the 937 days it took someone to get access in a specific area. it's very easy for us to point fingers. They don't pick up their phones. We need to collaborate on what exactly the problem is. So we need to go dig deeper, root cause analysis, so that we help each other. You'll find that once you communicate with them, they'll tell you, we don't have certain infrastructure, we do not have this and that. And I think it's a good opportunity at this moment to start leveraging upcoming technologies, AI, drones, and trying to invest into knowledge around that and how we can leverage that to our advantage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zhao. Your closing remarks. Your closing remarks.
我也谈点个人的看法啊。我个人感觉，围绕着海缆中断，应该分3个层面，来采取措施。第一个呢，就是事前的预防，因为现在大家都知道，这个技术发展很快，说需要利用一些新的技术，不管是船的技术，还是监测的技术，包括一些追踪定位的技术，要提前怎么样有效的预防。与此同时呢，在预防这个环节呢，我个人感觉可能要加强一些制度的一些完善，在这个政策方面，出台更有利于这个提前防范的一些政策措施。第3个呢，我个人感觉可能要加强一些有效的联动的作用，这样的话呢，效果会更好。第2个阶段呢，就是适中的阶段。适中阶段，我个人感觉呢，更多的是怎么样能够快速响应，怎么样能够及时的有维护船能够派出，同时提升这个维护的能力。所以从这点来看，这也是我们建立这个咨询平台，发挥各方作用。更重要是，对于一些好的实践案例，大家怎么样更好的分享。第3个呢，我个人感觉，在这个事后阶段，要进行很好的梳理总结，找出一些薄弱环节，找出一些可以进一步完善的一些制度措施，最终形成一些好的制度、好的做法。最后呢，我想说的是，应该说我们今天开的这个会，不管是上午的闭门会，还是今天下午的国际海缆韧性的分会，我理解这就是一个新的平台，也是一个新的起点。通过大家各方共同努力，我相信会有一个新的迹象。当然也是希望通过我们共同努力，我相信，我们国际海缆的韧性，会越来越好，会更好的服务或者造福于信息社会，会更好的服务人类社会。谢谢。
Thank you, Mr. Yassin. Briefly, your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. As said, the international submarine cable is the most critical issue is the collaboration between the different actors and the government. As you know, the submarine cable is span about the different territories, so they need collaboration, whether it is about the maintenance, repair, and the emergencies preparation. So, and also the joint research in every area and the research and development is standardization. And in the industry and the governments, we have the enough good practices. So from the ICBC or from ITU or from the industry as well. So it's better that we follow the technical guidelines and the good practice, whether it's for the government or for the industry. Then this collaboration will support a lot and will facilitate a lot, upgrading our standardization. And in the area, information sharing as well is another critical area between the governments and also response framework expansion between the industry and the governments again. So I will say collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My controller tells me there's never good time. There's never enough time for good things. But I think this is too good that in terms of our summary, a lot more need for institutional linkages in country. We need to talk to each other. The maritime regulator, the coast guards, the communications regulator, a lot more, a proactive framework where if it happens, then we have this single window where an operator goes and does not need to straddle between 10 or 7 regulators to get specific permits, each permit for purposes of, I see my regulator in Nigeria is nodding, hopefully in agreement that he'll start talking to his maritime colleague. Certainly, also linkages between the private sector themselves in terms of the possibility of establishing regional centers where deployments of systems, of ships can easily be coordinated between the various operators. Cooperation in terms of that sort of thing can easily be funded by the ecosystem players, and strong legislation. We need to see that a lot more of government is protecting these systems just like we protect our airspace, because this is important. West African region was off for quite some time when there was a cable cut, and it's not good for everyone. The same applies to the East African region. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I really sincerely want to thank you. As I say, this dialogue continues. There's never enough time for good things, and this has been good. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for being a wonderful audience. Bye-bye for now.
Group picture, please.